Have you ever been with someone who seemed so into you and then gradually they get cold or distant, or worst case scenario, they just vanish, like they disappear entirely? And on these occasions, you might even start blaming yourself. Maybe you were too much. Maybe you weren't enough. Maybe they got scared of how deep the connection got. Or maybe for some of you, it's you that feels this way. Maybe you start to kind of get like, I'm not feeling it the way I was in the beginning. Maybe after the honeymoon phase, you just kind of feel like I'm not as invested, or I'm starting to see a different side to this person. Maybe you, after the honeymoon phase, start to have things fizzle out and you're not as interested anymore. And maybe that keeps on happening, so you never get past a certain point with someone. So if you know me, I like to use some things to reference to when I'm talking about something I'm explaining. And since you don't know me and I don't have any real life examples, I can use series or films to kind of explain. But obviously it is going to be a lot more dramatic because it is a film, it's not real life, or it is a series. In this section, I wanted to use the Netflix series You. If you haven't seen it, it is a really good watch, depending on what you like. I loved it up to like season 3 or 4. I can't remember. The last 2 seasons I wasn't too keen on, I'll be honest. If you have watched it, amazing, you'll understand what I'm saying. If you haven't, check it out. And if you don't really, it's not really your thing, it's fine. But you'll understand what I'm saying either way. It's going to be the first series and a little bit of the second series, just so you have a clearer picture or understanding of what I mean when I say this. Bear in mind, it is dramatic because it's from TV. So let's talk series 1, Joe and Beck. So to make things a little less creepy, I'm going to just exclude the part about him stalking her. We're not going to that makes it a little creepy. But let's just look at them from the outside looking in. Joe and Beck look like fate. Joe is observant. He's thoughtful. He says all the right things. But it is not love. It is obsession. Joe isn't in love with Beck, but he is in love with the idea of Beck. Someone who can finally love him the way he feels he was never loved. But technically it was never about Beck, but she did become the canvas to his unresolved wounds. Fantasy love is not real love, it's control in disguise. What we call love is often a trap, not because we're foolish, but mostly just because no one ever actually taught us what real love should feel like. We got it from places like Disney movies, which could be very sort of delusional. Relationships we saw in real life that we might have thought that we should replicate, they're not going to be healthy because everyone's human, and depending on how you grew up, your parents, their lifestyle, you may have seen things that seemed like it was love, but actually it could have been things like codependency or unhealthy patterns, things like that. A lot of us are damaged, but in a way it's there for us to figure out what our version of healthy love is, if we ever do get there. If you've ever had that feeling that someone's so into you and then they sort of just fizzle out, or it disappears, or they disappear, or you just don't know what's going on, or you tend to feel like that, you start to get a little bit less motivated, let's say. So I want to move into what I call love traps, and you can fall into one of these or you can fall into more than one of these. However, if you do, it's not because you're broken, it's not because you're damaged or anything like that. You have just been repeating a pattern that has kept you safe. So love trap number 1, the fantasy love trap. So this is where you are in love with what they could be and not what they are. It's not intimacy, it's imagination. So again, a good example is Joe and Beck. He's pouring everything that he didn't receive from his first, I suppose you could say, his first female love, which was his mother. Everything he never received and everything that he kind of wanted her to receive, in a way. A lot of codependency in that dynamic. But the projection was of Beck that she was almost going to be this person that could rescue him, that could heal all the trauma that he'd faced, that would change his fate, so to speak. But going back in time kind of changed what had happened for him by healing him now. Obviously, in series 1, what I kind of acknowledged from Beck, and I'm sure you guys saw it as well, was Beck was a bit of a mess herself. But that was where Joe got to play this hero, the fantasy. He got to rescue her from the mess that was herself and the other people around her that were causing her to be this destructive mess. Nobody was, good for her. No one was anyone that was she needed good people around her, and he felt she just needed saving, she needed protecting. And he had this fantasy of being the hero, because what we saw gradually is that he never got to save his mom, and when he did, he was punished for it. So it's almost like he's making up for his old childhood wounds, old traumas, and he would be able to kind of like relive that, and this time he would be able to save the girl who as a child was his mom. Now it would be Beck. So he projected that fantasy onto Beck of, I'm here, I can save you, I can rescue you, and I can finally live out the fantasy of me being adequate enough to step in and change your life, and change your life for the better. And I'll feel satisfied because I'll be healed because I finally was able to do that. And you'll feel satisfied because you need saving, you need someone to protect you. Unfortunately, that's not how it turned out, obviously, and that's not usually how it turns out. But the projection of a lot of the time will be stemming from childhood wounds or things that didn't work out for you that you need to heal, but you project it onto someone else so that that fantasy gets to play out. But it is in fact just a fantasy, it's not reality. And that's where we pretty much end up recreating a story or a dynamic that you either never got to fulfill, or it went so horribly wrong, or it was so much chaos or trauma that you're just trying to rewrite that old story. Imagination, I suppose, being better than the reality. And what happens is you meet the person, or they meet you, and they project that whole fantasy onto you, or you onto them. And then we start to see the real version of them, because no one is able to uphold your fantasy in real life. It's not going to happen. Love trap number 1 would definitely lead into the reason, as to one of the potential reasons why sometimes you might feel like you're really into someone, and then obviously they're going to show their ass, they're going to show who they really are, and it's not going to fit in with your little story that you had, because nobody's perfect, everybody's human. You're wanting this story to be written in a certain way, and they don't have the script. So you can pretty much want what you want, but they are their own person and they're going to do things in their way. So once they show or reveal that they're not exactly who you thought they were in your imagination, which is likely the case, you're putting them up on this higher pedestal, in other words, and when they fall off that pedestal, because they're human, and they ultimately they will, which is going to feel like, this isn't all it's cracked up to be, this isn't the person that I thought I fell for. So let's move on to love trap number 2, the anxious love trap. Now, of course, many of us know about attachment styles that we tend to develop as a minor, usually between the ages of 0 to 5. And if you don't know about attachment styles, it's worth looking into to kind of know which one you might fall into. But there are many psychological components that fall into these life traps. So, of course, there's other elements. We're going to talk about the anxious love trap in the way that it can affect your love life. So the anxious love trap kind of has you confusing anxiety with chemistry. So You know, there's little butterflies you feel and you're like, oh, this person gives me butterflies. I get nervous around them. Usually that is a good sign that it's not probably the right person for you. It's probably the entirely wrong person for you. In fact, that's your nervous system's way of saying, hey, I remember this feeling. Run, bitch. So excited. I'm falling in love. And by the way, fun fact, when you feel nervous, when you feel excited, they're the exact same feeling. It's just whatever you tell your brain. So if you're feeling nervous, but you think it's because you're excited because this person's great for you, then your brain's going to accept that. But your nervous system is sounding the alarm for whatever reason. It's because you're excited, it's because you're nervous. But you've now told yourself this is because you're excited. So your brain accepts that. So usually in this case, you will tend to confuse anxiety with chemistry. For example, you will feel alive when they text you and then dead if they don't. Or like completely spiraling when you haven't heard from them. But then when you hear from them, everything's forgotten again and you're like, they messaged me, they called me, they want to see me. You know, there will just be this constant emotional roller coaster. And it will keep you excited, but it will keep you anxious and it will keep you in that loop of highs and lows and highs and lows. And that might feel really exciting at first, but ultimately it will leave you exhausted. And most of the time in these cases, you're not in love. You're addicted to the unpredictability. I don't know, maybe you're addicted to something else. It starts with something and it ends with matized. So when we talk about the anxious love trap, let's kind of think about series 2 in You, which was Joe and Love Quinn. And when we start to think of Love Quinn, I think it also spills into series 3. It just didn't have the same effect, didn't it? It just felt like Love Quinn was the anxious attachment style. And it wasn't really as cute when it was her. When it was Joe, it was like, oh wow, he wants to be the hero. When it was Joe, it felt almost endearing. When it was Love, it was very much like control, and I need to keep this from happening, I need to keep that from happening. And so the way she displayed that was, you know, of course, unaliving people left, right and centre. Anxious style didn't work out in the end. It's like two anxious styles coming together. I don't know what I would describe Joe's style as, but it didn't go with Love Quinn. We started to really see how that unfolded in a negative way. It's like he wasn't even sort of attracted to her in that way anymore. It's like once Joe realised that she didn't need saving, he wasn't really... he was gone, let's put it that way. So if we're looking back on Love Trap number 1, the fantasy of it was great, but then once you get to series 2 and 3, when he's actually with Love Quinn and she's more of a Love Trap number 2, which is the anxious love trap, it just doesn't seem to fit. It doesn't work out somehow. The personalities don't match. She can't play into that rescuing fantasy that Joe has. One, because now it's not as exciting because they were married, they were living together. But two, she became the one that wanted to rescue, and it was more out of a sense of control because she had that anxious style attachment. And we got to remember, Joe doesn't actually know how to rest in love. It's all about being needed, or him chasing or controlling the situation. So it doesn't really fit in with the whole fantasy, you know, once he had the white picket fence. And I think he did say something like that in season 3 when we first discovered that, you know, they just had a baby, and we were like, oh, well, I was like, what's going to happen here? Like, you know, we're used to him being in this role. And it turns out he was too, because he just projected that fantasy onto someone else. That's where is Marianne? I think her name is Marianne. That's where she comes into it. It's like, oh, there's a new person to save. You know, if anything, love kind of turned into his nightmare from hell. Which was actually kind of funny. But anyway, she is very anxious, isn't she? She needs things to be going her way. She needs to control everything in order for her to feel safe. And it just rubbed Joe the wrong way. It was a repellent for his nature. And so ultimately, anxious love will always have this feeling of urgency as opposed to alignment. It would definitely scream more, I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I need you to do this so that I know I can feel safe. And the whole idea is you don't feel safe, and that's why it's a problem in the first place. But the anxious trap will always attract people that are either unavailable, that are a runner, that are distant, that are emotionally shut off or closed off, or that aren't as much into the person as they're into them. There'll always be a reason as to why they can't get close. Maybe this person is, the standard textbook anxious attachment and avoidant, which is like the perfect duo because you have one running and you have one chasing. So you'll always kind of align with people that will validate that anxious style attachment, because you need that to kind of thrive, and you mistake that for being in love when actually it's just a feeling of alarm bells going off. Moving on to life trap 3, the caretaker trap. You fall for people who you want to fix in this trap. You look at them and you think, if I love them enough, or if I love them in the way that they've never been loved before, then they are going to change through my love. Like, they just needed someone to really love them in the way that they need to be loved. And I think I'm the person for that. That kind of thing. Ultimately, you can imagine that loving someone enough is not going to change them. It's not going to change who they are. So maybe we can take it to Bridgerton as a good reference. Penelope. Now Penelope, really good at choosing people who didn't choose her. Well, there was one particular guy, the main guy from the Bridgerton family, that clearly wasn't really choosing her. She was so overlooked. And she adapted this kind of caretaker role of, I can be anything you want me to be. I can be your confidant. I can, boost you up when you need it. I can be your biggest cheerleader. I can be whatever you want me to be. Just choose me. But, of course, 2 things can be the result of this. So the first thing that can happen is this Bridgerton guy will either get bored of Penelope and decide, you've given me everything, but something's still missing. I still don't want you. I want someone else. And then he will just leave and go with someone else. The thing that would be missing is that she's actually not suitable for him as their ultimate connection, but she's putting it on so that he believes she is. And that would be the thing that's missing. She's not being authentic to who she truly is. The second thing that can happen is that she will fall into that dynamic. So they all stay together, but she will fall into that dynamic of always having to overextend, which is exhausting and it's not sustainable. Nobody could keep up with that. And eventually she will fall flat on doing that because she's going to tire herself out, completely be burnt out in the relationship. And then she's going to stop doing the things that were the reason as to why he fell in love with her. He's obviously going to notice she's not doing those things anymore and be like, what's changed? Why has it changed? Why don't I feel the same way? Or why isn't the relationship the same? And it's obviously because she is no longer overextending herself. So it's kind of like a lose-lose situation. Either he still doesn't feel it because it was all based on what she could do for him as opposed to connection, or it's based on her overextending, which is going to get tiring at some point and she's not going to be able to sustain that. Either way, you're looking at a losing situation. Probably in real life that wouldn't work out so well. Hey, if it feels like work, it's probably not love. Please don't confuse effort with work. Effort is something that you should both be putting forward into the relationship. Work is something different. Moving on to life trap number 4. Are you ready? That is the mirror trap. So the mirror trap is all about you attracting people. These people are reflecting back the parts of you that you still need to love. This isn't usually to punish you, it's just to wake you up. Wake up. You might think that this is connection, but usually it tends to be karmic It's meant to reveal, not remain. So you'll find that these type of soulmates that come into your life and mirror things, they'll be very significant to you, but it's not really about the connection. It's more about, where do you need to love yourself? Where do you need to heal? Where do you need to show compassion to yourself? And usually you'll find it's things that kind of come up from childhood. I think childhood is a big one, especially as you can't really process the emotions because you don't have the emotional intelligence, enough depth or understanding to be able to understand certain things about your childhood, certain emotions about your childhood. Of course, at the time it just feels painful, but you don't exactly know how to rationalize or understand it. So when someone comes, and it's usually shaped you into who you are, the things from your childhood. So when someone kind of comes along, it's to kind of shake that up, because you're not going to really know any different until someone mirrors back to you, this is how you are, or this is what's going on for you, you know. Either they're going to do it in a way that's going to just be so dramatic, it breaks your foundational structures and beliefs. And a lot of the time, these kind of karmic connections that are kind of like reflections and mirrors, it usually is very short-lived, but very, very intense. That's how you'll kind of know what kind of connection the karmic connection is. It's supposed to teach you. It's supposed to teach you and then go. Really, it doesn't stay. Experience as something very significant and be very grateful for it, because it would have shaped you and changed you dramatically. So the kind of character match that I would reference with this one is more like, think the series Euphoria, Rue and Jules. Like codependency dressed as love. Codependent dynamics can really be a trip as well, especially if you actually have an addiction. And a good and simple way to kind of check if you're more in love with the addiction and not the person, and I'm not laughing because addiction is not funny, with the addiction than the person, is, can you be around that person without getting high in some kind of way? Is it based on connection, or is it something that you enjoy doing together? So addiction is kind of a bit of a different one, but there are many forms of codependency. Codependency can come in the form of, I don't want to be alone, for example. I just don't want to be by myself, so I'm choosing to be with someone to escape that reality. There's many forms of, codependency. So a good thing to remember in this one is that sometimes your soulmate is really just your shadow in disguise. Life trap number 5. The potential trap. Oh, how many of us have done this one? So they're not consistent, but they're full of potential. They have the potential, but they're not their potential. You want them to be the potential, you see the potential, but then you see the potential, so you're chasing that potential. You know what I'm saying? Like that kind of thing. You get what I'm saying? So you hold on because of the feeling you once had, but not the reality you're in now. That can take many forms as well, because sometimes you can be with someone, it could have been going all well, but then it started to really decline. But because it went so well in the beginning, you can just keep holding on to that. This could be even years later. Things might have really declined. The person might have become really complacent, or things just changed. The relationship dynamics changed, or something happened to cause things to change. Either way, you get to that stage where it's like, I remember when they used to do this to me, and don't you remember all the good times, and don't you remember this, and don't you remember that? Ultimately, you kind of got to see the reality for what it is now, not what it was back then. You will be there for years and years, 20 years later, talking about, remember how it used to be in 1999 when you used to bring me breakfast in bed. All the while, this person has not brought you breakfast in bed for like 10 years, but you are just still holding on to the ideas of the way things used to be and hoping that it returns to that. And the truth is, it's just not going to happen. Go with the reality, not the idea of how it used to be. And of course, the other idea of potential is that you can see a lot of potential in this person, but they're just not bringing it forward. And you're like, I know you can do it. I know you got it in there. I know you can do this. I know you have it in you, but they're just not bringing it. And after a while, if they're not bringing it, you just have to kind of let that go. The potential thing is like a very slippery slope, because you want to be able to see potential in someone. But if it's not kind of being realized, the potential's not being realized, there's not really much you can do. So I would say allow yourself a certain amount of time. And if nothing's changing, it's time to probably go. So for this one, let's reference Carrie from S and the City. Ew, my favorite series. Love S and the City. Let's go with Carrie and Big for this one. Always believing that there was potential. She chased this man down, because in her mind, like, he's the person that could give her what she wanted. A lot of it was like wanting what you can't have, and I'm sure some of it was like ego of like, I'm supposed to be the one that ends up with him, you know. In her mind, it's like that's end game kind of thing. And for him, it was probably a bit more like, you know, that's me settling. I don't know. I don't know. We'll all have different opinions on that one, but he married Natasha, as we know, and it kind of seemed to give Carrie an understanding of like, you can be the person that I want you to be. You just weren't being that with me. But that in some ways kind of makes it worse, because it's like she wants to chase even more, which is why they kind of go back into having an affair. Granted, like, he came back to her, but in her mind, she must have been thinking like, you know, it was, you can do this, you know, you can be the person that I want you to be. We obviously don't know enough about Carrie's childhood to make a decision on, you know, why she was so anxiously attached to Big, I would say, in some ways. But one thing we do know is that her father was absent. It was an absent father figure, and Big is quite a few years older than Carrie. So maybe there was some sort of link in the father figure and the father figure being absent. And then, you know, sometimes it can kind of be like chasing what you never had, you know, subconsciously she's feeling like, finally I'm getting the love and attention from this older male. It might have started that way, and then it was this thing of like, why can't you just be what I want you to be? You have the potential, you know, you're so close to being what I need you to be. But every time she got further up the ladder and more invested, she would be probably waiting deep down in her gut feeling would be telling her he's going to disappoint you again. And every time he would prove her right, he would disappoint her again. But she still held on to it because of the potential, because they almost were. Every time they got together, they almost were. But then, of course, Big will pull the rug under her feet, and she'd be a crying mess and go back to...
I am such an idiot!
What the fuck?
I'm running around town in a beret, buying your greasy food, and you don't even care if I'm in your life.
Would you calm down?
No, you know what? I am so tired of calming down.
Look, I have to be in a relationship where if I have to go to Paris, I have to go to Paris.
Fine, go to Paris, and then what happens to us next year when you decide you just have to go to Brazil?
This isn't about us. This is about work.
No, this isn't about work. This is about us getting closer and you getting so freaked out that you have to put an ocean between us.
I don't want to talk about this anymore.
Why is it so hard for you to factor me into your life in any real way?
I guess old habits die hard.
Well, maybe I can't do this anymore.
I understand.
Yeah, I bet you do. You said you loved me.
I do.
Then why does it hurt so fucking much?
And the pattern would repeat again. He would be running, she would be chasing. It would always be the same. Now, some of you might not do this with the same guy. A lot of us won't keep chasing the same guy, or sometimes you do. Sometimes over the years, it just keeps on happening. Definitely pick different guys or different girls in different vessels. So You could go after the same type of energy where you're the chaser, the person's the runner, just different people. So either way, potential is another way that you can be trapped, and that can be your downfall in love. Love built on what could be and not what actually is. So here the lesson is to not mistake emotional breadcrumbs for the full meal. In fact, there's actually a saying that you marry your unfinished business. So in a lot of cases, it will be things or dynamics that played out in your childhood or your teenage years or wherever, where you felt like you didn't get what you wanted, and so you will actually just play that out in adulthood, but with your partner. So if you were someone that never received love from your parents, or you were always made to feel inadequate, you would always be trying to make it up in your marriage, and your partner would kind of line up with you on that, and they would always make you feel inadequate. And so a lot of the time our inner child is playing out in relationships. So you'll have, for example, someone that really just keeps making you feel inadequate because one or both of your parents, or someone that was significant in your life, always made you feel that way, like nothing was ever enough. So when you get with your partner, it's just a familiar feeling. You don't necessarily know why, but it just feels familiar. And so that would be unfinished business. It's like you want to replay or recreate that scenario, but this time you are adequate. It just doesn't work like that. Or you grew up without a father figure, like we were talking about Carrie having an absent father figure. It's like, now am I worthy? Now am I worthy? It's like Big will be the one that's just going to keep making her jump through hoops to prove that she's worthy. And because she had that absent father figure, she's going to keep jumping through those hoops to show, like, now if I do this, will you stay? Now if I do that, will you stay? It's the same dynamics that's just kind of being played out, but in a partnership. But it's kind of like the unfinished business or unresolved issues of your parents, caretakers, or whoever was a huge influence in your life in your younger years. So it's a good way to kind of catch yourself in the love trap and go back to where it came from. So going back to when love feels more anxious than aligned, there's a version of chemistry that isn't actually chemistry. It's your nervous system recognizing familiar danger. So you get butterflies in your stomach, not because it's like magic, like we've been taught, but more because your body has learned to interpret inconsistency with excitement. The anxiety of it all becomes addictive, but real love isn't supposed to feel like survival. So when someone makes you doubt your worth every day, when you're constantly unsure about where you stand, that's not alignment. It isn't alignment. That's usually like a trauma bond dressed up as a soulmate. You with me on that? It's a trauma bond. So love really shouldn't be activating your abandonment wounds. It should be soothing them. Healthy love should actually feel like you can be yourself, you can breathe, you can be comfortable. But we often miss it because we're usually so addicted to chasing that spark. Actually, spark is often really mistake the spark thinking that it's the fire, but it's not. It's like the fire alarm. Passion is a good feeling, but it's usually very like short-lived. It's usually very intense, and love shouldn't always feel like intensity. Really, it should feel like clarity. That's how I would describe it. The difference between passion and intensity. Passion and intensity is great, but it's very short-lived. But clarity is a different kind of feeling, not to be mistaken for boredom. And not to say that if you feel a spark, like you're wrong for feeling a spark, but it should really feel like a connection as opposed to like is there anything that grounds the connection? Because we can all be excited in the honeymoon phase of love, but is there anything that actually grounds the connection, that feels safe? There should be other elements that make you feel safe and like this love is healthy, or on the road to a healthy partnership at least. To give a little bit of an insight on spiritual mirroring and projection, everyone we meet holds a mirror to us. Joe didn't see Beck necessarily. He saw the hope of healing through Beck. When we don't love ourselves fully, we tend to build relationships based on fantasy and not the reality of the situation. Of course, eventually the fantasy collapses, and when it does, people pull away. We're not going to go on to what Joe did, because that's just going to go that far. That's telly, but ultimately people will end up pulling away. A lot of the time, those kind of people, they never loved you, they more loved who you made them feel like. And it temporarily takes them out of the pain that they're in. So momentarily, he could have relieved himself from this pain by actually changing the narrative of the story. And sometimes we attract mirrors, not matches. So let's talk breaking the pattern without the cliche, go on your healing journey, because not everyone wants to spend 24/7 healing, and we all have stuff to do. And I'm not saying don't heal, but sometimes you just don't want to hear you need to heal before you're in your next relationship. I, for one, am sick of hearing healing. You spend your whole life healing, that's fine, and that's a fact. And if you're making the effort for yourself and you're putting the work in to be the best version of yourself, that's perfect. You should be healing. But it doesn't always mean that you have to be alone and you have to always be in your hermit mode and deep introspection, wondering where everything's going wrong and gaining insight and clarity and not living life. We still have to live and we still want to be loved. So where do we go from here? We discover we have one or more of these life traps. What do we do to kind of move ourselves out of that dynamic and attract healthier love? Or you've heard many times before, nobody is perfect, but you do still need to work on yourself. So you're not going to just get out of it that easily, because there are very unhealed people in the world and they go around causing mass destruction. They just go from relationship to relationship with the same thing happening, breaking hearts, the same outcome. Sometimes you do need some time to yourself, but we're not saying it has to be forever and ever, amen. Because life is constantly a journey and you're constantly learning more and more about yourself and bettering yourself. So I would suggest interrupting that pattern. Number 1, you're going to choose calm over chaos. And you don't have to necessarily go with it just because it's calm, but you're just going to try and sit with it. How does it feel? Give it a go. Don't completely write it off just because it's too calm or it's too boring. Just sit with it. Have like a slow burn. See how it goes. It might be someone that you want to be with for a long time. It might not. But the idea is to just don't write it off straight away. Sit with the calmness. Because we all have a choice. What about the situation is causing you to feel drawn to it? And you'll know if it's chaos. You're going to listen to your nervous system, not your fantasies. 3, stop trying to earn love. You don't need to do anything. Don't want to confuse earning love with effort, because making an effort is important in everything you do. You should make effort. So stop doing so much. In fact, fall back. Back up. You need to just back up. All you need to do is really be your authentic self and make an effort to show the person that you're with that you love and appreciate them. Because I noticed that not having the same love language could be really misunderstood. Clarify your standards, not your fears. So you should be focused on what works for you, what makes you feel loved, wanted, appreciated. And not everyone has to bend to your every will and everything you desire and to make you happy. But you should express the things that make you feel loved, appreciated, etc. And you shouldn't focus on your fears. I just never want someone to cheat on me. I just hate when people lie to me. I've had this in the past and I just don't want anyone to do that to me again. Then stop talking about it. Because the truth is, wherever you focus your attention and your energy, you will get more of the same. So if you want more liars and cheaters and people that lie to you and people that are this and people that are that, then keep talking about it. Finally, let your past teach you, but not lead you. There's a difference. Led by your past, it means you're still carrying the same sensations that you were feeling from the past situations and you're kind of just carrying it into the new relationship. But if you're learning from it, you're able to process that emotion. And healthy love should always feel like clarity, not confusion. We all embody the qualities of the things that we want in our partner. I want you to imagine that you are going to be courting you for the next week. So if you love flowers, you're going to get yourself a beautiful bouquet of flowers. You're going to go to the shop and you're going to splash out on yourself and get yourself some flowers. If that's what you imagine as your partner doing every now and again, just getting you flowers just because, what does that feel like? Get yourself a bouquet of flowers. Don't skimp on yourself because you don't want your partner to be cheap. You want them to be a generous partner. So you're not going to get anything that is just like rubbish, like these will do. You're not going to treat yourself like that. You're going to get the best bouquet of flowers. And let's just say it wasn't particularly flowers you liked. Maybe you like going out for a nice meal and you want your partner to create date nights for you. You're going to do that. So for example, take yourself out to a nice restaurant. Make sure these things are nice. You're not skimping on yourself. You're being generous with yourself, because this is what you want your partner to do. The qualities of the things that we want in our partner. You're going to take yourself to this nice restaurant, right? Pull out all the stops. You're going to order what you want from the menu with confidence. You're going to dress up in your best gear. Maybe you're wearing your best dress and heels, or you're wearing your best shirt, and you're really going to make the effort to impress yourself. Maybe you've even got some nice lingerie underneath your clothes. Whatever you want. Order the best meal that you really, really like. Maybe it's a candlelit dinner and you're going to spend time with yourself. You're going to enjoy the evening. When you leave, you're going to tip the waiter or the waitress, because remember, we don't want anyone cheap. No, we don't. So you're going to tip the waiter or waitress, just like you would want your partner to. And you're just going to romance yourself for that night. So maybe you don't want to drive. Maybe you want to be chauffeured home like your partner would do for you. And so in that case, maybe you just get an Uber home. You know, make do with the scenario. Before you left, maybe you just scattered some roses on your bed. And when you come home, it's like, oh, it smells good. You know, you light a candle, there's roses on the bed. Or what I find best, especially when I'm manifesting, is I run myself a bath and I'll have rose petals in the bath and I'll have a candle on the side. Being in water, being naked is like the ultimate vulnerability, but being in water, it feels like a portal when I'm manifesting. So once you've done all these beautiful things for yourself, you've taken yourself out for dinner, you've romanced yourself, you've gone in the bath, you've got the rose petals going, you are in a really good state to manifest, because you are in a place you feel sensual, where you feel romantic, where you feel good. If you are going to manifest specifically about love, this is the place you want to be in. It's about the feeling. How does it feel? How does everything you're doing feel? I feel special. So you're just going to journal. After you've done that nice thing for yourself, the type of thing that you would want your partner to do, maybe the next morning when you wake up, oh, I had a beautiful night, and you actually go and make yourself breakfast and you bring it to bed. Maybe you like your partner bringing you breakfast in bed, so you're going to eat your breakfast in bed. Maybe you add a little rose onto it. Whatever you want, you're just going to get yourself in a really good romantic space where you've romanced yourself. You're feeling really sensual, you're feeling like you've really loved on yourself, and you're going to write down the feelings that you're feeling and the things that your partner is. So you don't have to be specific. Obviously, you know, you don't want to go be too crazy. You obviously know you took yourself to dinner, or you brought yourself breakfast in bed. So what you're going to say is, I feel so special. I love breakfast being brought to me in bed. Or I feel amazing. I had such a nice night. The dinner was delicious. I feel so grateful. Whatever you want to say. I had a wonderful time. It was so nice that I didn't have to drive. I was able to just lay back and allow myself to enjoy the journey. These things are deriving from the feeling that you feel. Even when it comes to writing the list of the things that you want in a person, we all embody the feelings that we want our partner to bring to us. We think we need to search it externally, but it's already in us. It's internal. We just need to give that to ourselves. So even if it was, oh, I want, you know, my partner to have a great chest and abs, it sounds pretty superficial, but maybe you want a partner with a great chest and abs. But how does that make you feel? You feel proud when you're walking with that person? Maybe you like the fact that that exudes health and confidence because you're healthy and you're confident and you go to the gym and you take care of yourself. So how does that feel? Maybe it feels like you and your person going out there and working out together and looking after yourselves together and being healthy together in this amazing bond. So I feel so bonded with my partner when we're out there and we're working out. I love the way we take care of ourselves. It makes me feel like our wealth is health. I love our partnership because of that. Great, but okay, well, that makes me feel like the luckiest man in the world. So I feel like the luckiest man in the world. You're cultivating those feelings. What's going to make you feel like a lucky person? Go out and do it and then journal about it. Whilst you're in the energy of that feeling, write about it. So you're matching the feeling and you're lining that up with the words and you're sending it off as a rocket of desire. This person always makes me feel like I'm the only person in the world. They make me feel special. You want to embody that energy of feeling like you're making yourself feel special. You know, so the dinner things and things like that. Whilst you're in that energy, that's when you're going to start writing and journaling and sending off the rockets of desire. That's how you're going to call in aligned love, but try to base it on what's going to feel connected with you. So you're going to essentially be dating yourself, courting yourself. What is it you would want your partner to be like? You're going to treat yourself like you are the partner this week. This week, you're going to be your own boyfriend or girlfriend. You know what you want best. You know what you're craving. You're going to become that. Don't forget to comment on what your love trap is or what your love traps are. And what are you going to be doing for yourself this week to make yourself feel special or loved, or how you want your partner to make you feel. Most importantly, mindset matters. So let's create magic. See you in the next one.